McKinney Smith. In 2009, while going through a divorce, I decided to jump straight into entrepreneurship. In 2012, I lost my sister and asked myself, what legacy do I want to leave behind? Since then, I've become a serial entrepreneur, helping other women publish their books, produce their podcasts, and reach their big goals to walk in their greatness. I realized the importance of sharing our stories of resilience and how it can be another's guide to walk in a manner worthy of their calling. We are blessed to be a blessing, so get ready to be blessed with an inspiring testimony. Hey, Legacy Leavers. Thank you for joining us on the Walk My Stilettos podcast, where we have conversations with amazing women that are letting us step into their shoes. I help women own their voice so they can create impact, prosperity, and legacy. I get excited when I see another woman succeeding, but what interests me more is her backstory and her mindset on how she got there. So today's guest is about to bless us with her testimony, and since you're already here, you may as well subscribe. Today we have Trey Anthony. She's an award-winning writer. She is a relationship and life coach. She is the first Black woman in Canada to have a television series on Primetime Network, and her work includes the plays, The Kink in My Hair, and How Black Mothers Say I Love You. Trey's life purpose is to empower women to live their best damn lives, and her new book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, published by Hay House, is available now. So please welcome to the show, Trey Anthony.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story with us.
Yes, this is going to be a good one.
Before I even start, yesterday I was interviewing Selena Caesar Chauvin for the second time on the show, and we were talking about her book, and she just kept talking about your book, and I was like, I didn't even tell her that I was having this conversation with you today because we were already overexcited.
Oh, wow. Yes, we're both fans of each other's books. So, yes, it's very good. Yes, it's amazing how many Black women are coming out with books at this time. It's wonderful.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. That is what I am here for. So, the basis of this podcast is because, on social media, we see everyone's highlight reel, but people are more inspired by knowing who you are on a deeper level, getting to know the adversities that you've had to go through to get to where you are presently. So before we jump into your story, I love to ask the women that come on the show, because as women, we have all these different titles that we go by, but a title that I feel isn't given enough significance is our name, because our names have meaning. So I know that I've seen in multiple places that you have a boy name. So I would love to know, not only do you know, Trey, the meaning of your name, but I guess the story behind how your parents chose your name.
Oh, wow. Yes. I don't really know the full meaning of my name. I should look that up. But my real, what they call it, your name on your birth certificate, government name, is Tracy. But everybody calls me Trey. So it's so funny. I'm so connected to the name Trey that I don't even look around when you meet somebody with your same name and you're like, oh, here's another Tracy. I don't make that connection at all.
Wow.
So
I love it.
Apparently my parents wanted to call me Amanda. Thank God that didn't happen. No offense to any Amandas out there. But I just don't feel like I could have been Amanda or Amandy. Like, I'm just like, oh, no. And apparently it was my father's best friend who walked into the hospital room and said, oh, call her Tracy. She looks like a Tracy. And that's what they went with. But my mom, all during her pregnancy, said she wanted to call me Amanda, that she really liked the name Amanda. So, but I love having a gender neutral name, and it's just gotten me so far. And I love to when people, I'm always quite surprised when people reach out and they want to intern at your company or they want to work with you. And then they go, Mr. Trey Anthony, I'm such a big fan of yours. And I'm like, well, if you were a fan, you would know I'm a woman.
Then you would know.
So that's always something that makes me laugh, things like that. Yes.
I love it. I love it.
That's,
So I didn't know that your, government name was Tracy. So I had Googled Trey, and it refers to the number three, but like three for card games. So three in dice or cards or dominoes. So I was like, interesting.
ooh,
I wonder if that resonated with you in any way.
hmm. Three, no, because my lucky number is seven. So I was hoping it had something to do with seven, but no. And I know Will Smith has a son named Trey, so I know that. So I feel connected to him, but I think it's because he's the third. Because Will Smith is named after his father, and then Trey is named after Will. So because he's the third, they call him Trey. So I guess that's where they got the three from. But yeah,
Okay.
no, I didn't know. So no, it doesn't resonate with me quite well yet, but maybe it might grow on me. Yes.
Okay. So I want to jump straight into your story. And after watching your TED Talk coming out of your box, I want you to share with us how you came out of your box.
Oh, wow. For me, it was really about, I always knew that I wanted to be an actor, and I always knew I wanted to be in entertainment. And for the start of my career, I think I was a bit naive, especially as a Black woman, and especially as a Black woman who didn't fit the Hollywood norms of whatever beauty is supposed to be. You know what I mean? I was a dark-skinned Black woman with natural hair. And so there weren't many roles that were coming my way, except for like crackhead number one, baby mama number two, woman on welfare number three. And so for me, coming out of my box meant really about starting my writing career for myself and starting to write the stories that I wanted to tell and to see. And I wanted to definitely see authentic portrayals of Black women. And I think that's why my plays and my TV shows got so popular, because it was the first time, especially as Black Canadian women, we had seen women this layered before, you know? And it was also the same way in why I felt to write Black Girl in Love with Herself, my self-help book, because for so many years as well, I had, I don't think there's a self-help book that I hadn't read. And yet there was definitely some things that were missing in those books that I could not identify with. And so for me, coming out of my box also meant writing the self-help book that I wanted to read that really address how we as Black women have to navigate this world that sometimes isn't the best for us, right? Like, let's just call it what it is, right? There's a lot of things that happen to us that white women are just very unaware of, when the mainstream is very unaware of, and we're only starting to have these conversations just recently where the mainstream is actually listening to us and believing us. So for me, coming out of my box meant always being authentic, always being true, always being vulnerable, and always taking a risk and doing things even when I'm scared. I try to be brave. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's so many things in there that you spoke to that I want to unpack, because as someone myself who's also in the personal development industry, and my mentor is a 90-year-old white man. So I know the struggles.
Yes.
Because a lot of my clients, when I was pushing, who my mentor was, and they're like, I don't resonate. No. So it wasn't until I started pushing my own narrative, my own experiences, was when I started to see success in my business. So you were talking about the self-help world and how important it was. From your perspective, there was no representation. Do you know what I mean? Like, people don't understand the importance of representation and how representation matters. And sometimes, and I know this was used as an objective around fellow coaches with me, well, tell people that it shouldn't matter who the messenger is. It's about the message. But also, if you don't see anyone that looks like you, it's almost like that vision that you have of it being possible for you isn't there. So I think it's so important that you wrote the book from that perspective. When I think about your story, and like I mentioned before, Selena Caesar Chauvin, even how transparent she was in her story. And she had mentioned to me yesterday how she was, inspired by when she read my book back in 2013 or 14 or whatever it was, how we are able to tell our story from our own narrative, how important that is for other women to be able to see themselves and to be able to, it's like social proofing, to be able to connect on a deeper level and realize, okay, wow, she had these experiences too. Okay, I'm not crazy. Oh, it's not just me. Like those things are so important.
It is. It's extremely important because I think when you're not part of the mainstream narrative, you start to really question if you and your experiences are valid and are real. And, it's just that small things of like authenticity. Like I've had women who have found my book and I've said, I was in Barnes and Noble and I picked up your book and I started reading the back. And then I looked in and the reason I picked it up because I saw a Black woman on the cover. It was as simple as that. Like I was just like, oh my God, who's this Black woman on the cover of a book in the self-help section in Barnes and Noble? know? So we don't realize how often and how hungry we are to see ourselves. And so that is really important. And so for me, it was one of the big reasons why I really pushed to get this book out and call it A Black Girl in Love with Herself. Because there was some, talks around, should we just call it A Girl in Love with Herself? And I was like, no, I'm a Black girl. Like every part of my experience is me as a Black girl walking through this world. And I really wanted, of course, there's other women, Asian, brown, indigenous women who have picked up the book, white women who it has resonated with. But I really wanted a book for us, by us, that Black women were like, hey, yeah, this is for us.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's even important that you spoke to that, because when you talk about sometimes when someone is writing something from their perspective, or even when someone chooses to pick a particular like niche to even focus on, you know who you are speaking to, and that's why you're able to tap into them on a deeper level and to resonate with them. But it doesn't mean you're excluding anybody else. Like you saying, yes, you wrote it for Black women, but there's also, other cultures that have resonated with the book. I can totally relate where I wrote my book for women as well. And then I had men that were reading the book and telling me, how they resonated with my experiences. So I think, sometimes people will look at, even if they're thinking about writing a book and they're like, oh, well, I want to make this for everyone. Well, no, if you make it too general, then you're going to miss out on a lot of people. And when you niche down and you get very specific about who you're talking to, people feel like you're talking directly to them.
Yes, exactly. And one of the things that I really love that people have said to me is, I feel when I'm reading your book, it's like a girlfriend talking to me, like my best friend talking to me. Like I feel like you're my bestie, right? And I just love that when people say, I know we don't know each other, but I feel like you're my bestie. Like the way you talk is exactly how me and my girlfriends talk behind closed doors when we think nobody else is listening. And you just get down and you say it like it is, and it's very relatable. So for me, that has been one of the biggest compliments and reviews of the book is when they say Trey Anthony is like your best friend in your back pocket, right? Kind of thing.
I love it. I love it. So in the book, you break down lessons and tools that you've used to heal in your life. And some of those things include setting clear and healthy boundaries, to stop being the family ATM, sorting out who your real friends are, confronting microaggressions, and forgetting who Black women are supposed to be, and falling in love with yourself.
Yeah.
There's so much goodness in there. And I'm like, what do I want to unpack first? Okay. So let's talk about the healthy boundaries part. Cause I think right now that's like a major focus for me. So I would love to unpack that with you. Like for women that are listening, what's some advice that you would give to them about setting healthy boundaries?
Yeah, I think for myself, I know I'm a very A-type personality. I'm also a former people pleaser. Like I love to make people happy, and I say yes to a lot of things that I should have said no to. And I think one of the biggest things, funny enough for me, what made me really become clear about my boundaries was becoming a mother, because I realized how my son responds to boundaries when I put them in place, and how he responds when I don't have any boundaries. And I realized that when you're wishy-washy about things, people, including a nearly 2-year-old, will run all over you, right?
Yep.
So I just decided, like, for me, it's about being very clear and saying to people, because the one thing that I used to always do is, if someone says, Trey, can you do blah, blah, blah? I'd be like, yeah, no problem. And I wouldn't take a look at my schedule. I would answer right away. I wouldn't even look and see, like, how that's going to impact the time away from my own time for myself, my own time away from my child, my own time, of just taking care of my household. And so now one of the things that I talk about in the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, I talk about saying to people that Tyrone's emergency isn't your emergency, right? So if he wants a response right away, you can say, hey, can you give me 24 hours or 48 hours? I'll get back to you on that. I'm going to think about that. And for you to be able to look at that and see if it makes sense. The other thing, too, where I find a lot of us who are type A personalities and come from immigrant families where we are the first generation of Canadians or first generation of Americans born in that country, a lot of us are what we call the successful children, right? And especially if you're the firstborn, there's a lot of things placed on you around just money. And I saw that within my own family dynamic and my friends' dynamic, that people thought that I had, this tree outside that I was just shaking and giving away money, right? And I was just like, come on, get your bucket full of the trade tree, right? And I think, even with the women I coach, a lot of them are very successful. And there's this thing called the success guilt, where we feel, because we quote unquote made it, and we don't want other people to think that we've changed because we've made it, or that saying, she get rich and she switch, right?
Oh yeah.
So by what we then do is then overcompensate, and overcompensate looks like giving away your money to friends and family at all times, always being the one to pick up the check, always the one to be the person who, when everybody's in crisis, you're there, and then there's nobody there for you. So it's putting those boundaries in place, even with friends who, I had a former friend, who was always in the same damn crisis over and over again. And it got to the point where I was just like, we've been having the same conversation for 15 years now, right? Like, when are we going to stop doing this? And I realized it was because I was indulging in this, right? Being very indulgent with her around having this conversation, giving her things to do and key steps, and, checking and stalking, her boyfriend at that time Facebook page with her. And then I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm grown.
Right.
Grown. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to do. And sometimes we got to recognize these things no longer serve us, and we're grown. And what would a grown person do with healthy boundaries? How would they move through the world? And so that's what I always ask the clients that I work with. And I also ask myself, I cannot keep saying yes to everybody, because every yes to someone is a no to yourself. So you have to also remember that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, first things first, you spoke about your son. Your son's name is Kai, correct?
Yes, Kai.
Yes. Yeah. My son's name is Kai as well.
Oh, wow. How old is your son?
He's 15. Yeah.
I've met so many women now with the name Kai, and all of them are older, because I kept thinking they bit my name, right? I was like, oh, they copied me. But every single woman I've met, all of their children are older than me. So I was like, no, I'm the one who's right? But I thought it was such an original name. And now I've been meeting so many people. Even a woman, her daughter's name is Kai, and she's about 5. Yeah.
Yep. So we've got female Kais in the family unique as well.
Yeah. So I thought it was being very unique. And now I've met at least half a dozen. Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful name. So on his birth certificate, it says Makai, but we call him Kai. We've been calling him Kai since he was born. His cousin's name is Akai, and we've got females in the family named Kai as well. So yeah, it's a beautiful name.
Yes, but I do love it.
But you spoke to, teaching your son boundaries. And I think it's important for people to hear how you setting boundaries for yourself, how he learned that, because young people will basically learn up or down by watching how we act, right? And what we do and how important that is in
Yes.
carrying on those habits. That was the first thing I definitely want to point out. And then the second thing, when you spoke about success guilt and the overcompensation, been there. So you struck a chord with me there.
Yes. Yes.
And then
Yes.
the part about evolving, and, when sometimes we may have friends that are, I'm going to say, stuck having the constant pity parties, and they invite us to the pity parties and we show up. But how many times are you going to show up before you say, okay, this isn't fun anymore. I'm not enjoying this. I'm, like you said, I'm too old for this. It's no longer enabling those behaviors, because if you've evolved, honestly, at the end of the day, we only attract what we're in harmony with. So as you start to evolve, the things that you may have connected to in the past, or that may have resonated with you in the past, you've moved above that. So those things you can no longer connect and relate to. And sometimes there are people that no matter how many tools you give them, no matter how many times you come to the rescue, no matter how many times you hold their hand, like you said, it's the same situation happening over and over and over again. Like, everyone evolves at a different pace, but you can't stay in that place with them, unfortunately. And people get upset when you don't. They feel like because of loyalty from, relations by family, or how long you've known them as a friend, that you're obligated to sit in it with them. And that's not true.
It's so true. Like even in my book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, I talk about, there's worksheets after each chapter. And one of the worksheets in the friends chapter of how you assess your friends, one of the questions I asked, I said, if you were at a dinner party and you were seated beside your current best friend right now, would you still choose to sit beside her? And would her conversation make you feel good about yourself? Would you feel that you were learning from that person? Would you find them intriguing? Would you say, hey, I would love to get your number for us to continue this conversation? And so many of us are stuck with our day ones that we call them. And our day ones are stopping us from going to being tens in our lives, right? Because we have this loyalty and we outgrow people. I always say to people, I'm not even the same woman I was 3 minutes ago, right?
Exactly.
So I'm always evolving, and you have to be around people who are evolving too, right? And it's not also about cutting off people or anything like that, but it's also just assessing, is this conversation a good one for me? And there came a point for me where I just didn't want to be involved in certain levels of conversations that some of my older friends from way back were having. I didn't want to be in that anymore. I needed something more to stimulate me.
Absolutely. And the more that you grow and the more you evolve and you start to, I'm going to say, tap into the fullness of who you are, the less space and patience you have for people who are sucking that energy from you. Because we only have, so much energy to go around. And if you're, a mom and you're building a business and you're doing other things that require a lot of you, you have less capacity for the things that are pulling you down or draining and sucking your energy.
Exactly. Yes.
So I want you to tell us how people can get back up from the bathroom floor. I mean, there's a lot of people, especially right now during the pandemic, people who have experienced all kinds of knockdowns, people who are probably still on the bathroom floor as they are listening to this podcast right now.
Yes. It's funny. I did an interview just yesterday, and I was saying to the person who was interviewing me that for the longest time, I felt that I could no longer give relationship advice to women because I missed the tsunami that was hitting my own life, right? So I felt a bit like a fraud, right? And she said to me, I feel this is who I want to get advice from, is a person who's been on the damn floor, right? A person who missed all of the signs and could say, hey, girl, these are the signs that I missed, right? So that was a really good way of looking at it, because for those of you who don't know the backstory, for me, when I started writing the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, I had gotten a book deal from Hay House, and the book deal was about me talking and coaching Black women on how to manifest a wonderful relationship in their lives, how to have, healthy relationships with their significant others, how to write your lists and make this person show up in your life. And at that time, I thought I was in a healthy, amazing relationship of 4 years. And 5 months before my book was due, I got a text from my partner saying, I no longer want to do this, right? And to say I was devastated would be an understatement. I also had a 2-week-old baby that I had just brought home, who I had adopted. I was given 14 days to leave the brand new condo that we had just moved into 4 weeks prior, and we were going into a pandemic. So to say I was on the bathroom floor, right, is an understatement, right? And then you also put in the financial piece, which was a real reality for me, that all of my shows were being canceled, all of my live events, my talks, all my clients now who couldn't afford to be doing things because they were now being affected by the pandemic were canceling left, right, and center. So financially, it was a lot for me as well, because I just saw every single thing that I thought financially would be coming in was now disappearing. And I was, basically living off of my savings as someone who's self-employed, right? And I was devastated. Like, I cannot even describe. Like, there were days that I literally curled up on the floor and could not move. And there was one moment where I was on the bathroom floor and I said, God, I don't want to die, but I don't want to live like this.
Wow. And
really and truly, it was kind of like this voice that came to me and said, you know what? Make your mess your message. Other women are going to learn from this, right? And so I remember calling up my editor and I was like, I can't write the book that I said that I was going to write because I'm going to feel like a fraud. How can I give relationship advice if this is what I'm going through? And then she said to me, well, what can you write? And I said, I can write a book on why, as women, we give away the job to someone else to love us. And then when they walk away, we then feel that we are no longer lovable or worthy. And in the first place, we shouldn't be giving away that kind of power to somebody. And also, why, as women, why are we so invested in checking off the checklist of, you meet your person by age 30, you buy your first house by age 32, you get married by age 35, you have your first kid by age 37, and we're checking off and posting all of these wonderful pictures on Instagram, and we're checking how many likes we've got, and yet we don't check in on ourselves are you really happy, right?
Yep.
And so I said, that is the book that I want to write. And so for any woman who's on the floor right now, I want to give you hope because I've been there, girl. Like, I think I was on the floor, underneath the basement of the floor, underneath the damn house crumbling floor. That's where I was. Is that you got to take it, not even day by day, but for me, I remember just saying a prayer, and I used to say, God, just get me through this hour. I'm going to just do it hour by hour. And everything in that hour required a little tenderness from myself. So there were days that I literally had conversations with myself. And I talked to like that little 6-year-old girl who now felt so frightened inside of me of not being picked, not being chosen, not being loved, and also feeling humiliated and embarrassed, right? Because everything that I had bet on had blown up in my face, and it was so public as well, right? And I would literally have conversations with myself saying, Trey, I love you. You are loved. You're going to get through this. There's a lesson in this for you, right? And then sometimes I would say, are you scared? It's okay to be scared. We're going to work through this. And it's also about finding support and real support. I talk about this in my book, how often as Black women, and I've been guilty of it myself, where when all of this was happening to me, my mom and sister came down, of course, to help support me in the way that they thought that I needed support. And one day I broke down in the bathroom crying, and I had never really cried in front of my mother. And I said to my mother, Mom, I don't think I can make this. Like, I don't think I can do this. I'm not going to make it. And my mother looked at me, and she said, well, remember whose daughter you are. You can't make this kill you. You can't make this kill you. Your mother and grandmother had it way worse. And I remember going after that, and I writing in my journal and saying, I know my mother means well, And she has always been that person who was my cheerleader, the person who gave me my pep talk, the person who told me to keep going. But at that time, I didn't need that. What I needed was someone to say, you know what, Trey, you're hurting. And here's a safe space for you to fall apart. And if you want to fall apart once, if you want to fall apart twice, if you want to fall apart 3 times, I'm here for you, because you need to cry about this. You don't need to have, put your chin up. You don't have to act like everything's okay. You need to break down.
The
and
toxic
as women,
positivity.
as Black women, we have to sometimes break down. And I realized that I had been that person to a lot of women in my life as well, sending them, all of these positive quotes like, "Girl, you got this." But what if you don't got it? What if you really don't got it? Yeah. And that's what I write about in the book, of finding and creating these safe spaces and being vulnerable enough to trust your emotions and be able to feel them and sit with them. Also maybe, seek outside help, be that therapy, whatever that is for you. But we have to learn how to still be brave, but yet be vulnerable in our bravery.
I have goosebumps right now. And this is the importance in telling our stories transparently. And I honestly believe that our stories may be about us, but they're not only for us, because there's always some part in someone else's story that you can resonate with or that you can learn from. And everything that you've just said in the last 5 minutes, I was like, oh my God, me too. Oh my God, oh my God, me too. Oh my goodness, me too.
Yes.
And I'm quietly listening as you're talking about each experience. And it was like, I resonated with every single part. And even how you started with speaking about in the beginning, when you got the book deal, the intention of the book, how things were supposed to go, right? I already know in life, things never go according to plan. So I stopped arguing with God. I'm like, okay, your way. How are we doing this? Because my way is clearly not the way. But, you went through an unexpected breakup. And I'm holding my heart as I say this, because I'm currently, and it's been 2 years, but I'm currently still working through my healing process. But it's like,
me too, girl. You being, I hear you on that.
Right. That's why I'm feeling you so hard right now. Because I'm like, you talked about the missed signs and how that's what people wanted to hear about. And when I experienced the unexpected breakup, that just like you, I was like, how the heck? What? I'm confused. And it was a similar manner to yours, where you said you got a text message. It was like, we lived together and I was out and he moved out while I was at my girlfriend's house. No conversation.
We should compare notes, girl. We should compare notes.
Okay. So the shock when you talk about having to rethink your whole life, everything that you had planned, because the person that you intended to spend the rest of your life with, not only are they no longer around, and everything that you had moving forward, including, children and life goals and business and and all of those things. And then throwing in my brain can't even process right now. I'm just like, how does this happen to so many Black women one after the other? Because I've had this same conversation even with Sasha Exeter. We had an episode a year and a half ago where we compared notes of what happened. It's like, it's devastating. And you have to go through this grieving process, but then you're still expected to show up, and you're still expected to be a good parent, and you're still expected to do this, and you're still expected to do that. Yeah. And people don't understand the depth of the hurt because we still show up. and then
that's it. Yes, that is right there. Because we still show up. Even when we're broken, even when we're tired, we still damn well show up.
Yeah. Right. And then when people try to support you, like you said with your mom, as much as she meant well, the talking about the older generation or whoever else experienced worse, I think one of the greatest hurts that we can do to someone when they're hurting is the comparative suffering. Because someone else's trauma, you could have 2 people experience the same exact trauma and one person be completely fine for the rest of their life, unaffected. But another person, their healing process could take years. We are different. We feel differently. We absorb things on different levels. We resonate with things differently. So to one person, that experience could be so devastating. So when people say, oh, well, someone else has it worse, or someone else, those things, I used to hear that. And
Yeah.
it's almost like I tried to adapt that mentality. But the more that I dig in to the truth of who we really are, to nature, to how we process in our brains and in our bodies, and to energy, and tapping into learning more about emotional intelligence, that is like, never say that to anyone who is hurting. Never.
Exactly. And that's what I talk about. Like, I say you should not do this comparison of pain. And that's what we do. Like, who has it harder? Who should be feeling more pain? I always say if somebody drowns in 6 feet of water or 4 feet of water, they're still drowning, right? They're drowning, right?
Yeah.
They're dead. Right? So I don't understand, like, someone's going to be like, oh, well, it was 6 feet of water and he's dead. And the other person was 4 feet of water and he said, they're still dead. So let's not compare. And so I always say to people, we cannot do this. And I think we do that a lot. And I grew up with mothers and grandmothers who always were like, oh, well, your life is so good. You have it so easy. And so I felt like I could never, ever say I was tired, I was sick, I was hurting or whatever, because I then also carried that message around in my brain that there's somebody out there who has it way worse than me. And that person usually is my mother or grandmother as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to say it's so toxic when someone is trying to process and they continually hear those messages, because that toxic positivity seeps into your paradigm and you begin to feel like, okay, maybe there is something wrong with me if I am, feeling this, and someone who had it worse didn't, show these same things. And then there's no safe space for you to express your feelings. And then you tuck those feelings in and they start to seep out in other areas of your life. And you're wondering why, you have trouble having future relationships and all these things, because you don't get to process your feelings.
Exactly. And I love when you said, like, it's even 2 years now and you're still healing. I'm going into, I think, my 19th month since the breakup. And I still say one of the things that I've learned is not to rush my healing and to know that it's okay, because I feel like, and I sense from certain people around me, family and friends, sometimes of like, oh, like, you need to get out there and start dating again. You're okay. And, that was just one bad person. You can't, but I'm still in the process of still healing and also sitting with this trauma, because it is trauma. And I think that's trauma. The other big thing that as Black women we do not recognize is when things are trauma and traumatic and traumatizing to us.
Because culturally we've been so passive.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's the thing. And we do not sit with it and go, wow, this is what I went through. Right. And that is one of the things that I've been really talking about a lot in my book, is us recognizing when we are experiencing trauma, us recognizing when we are hurt, us recognizing when we are scared, us recognizing when we need support, because we are so used to getting back up off the bathroom floor without even looking back and saying, wow, you were broken back there. What happened? Maybe you need to be down on the bathroom floor for a little bit longer, girl. You don't have to get back up right now. Right?
Wow.
But we don't get that time and we don't get that luxury and we don't give it to ourselves. And for me, I was like, you know what? If I got to be on that bathroom floor for a couple of weeks, months, even a couple of years, so be it, because I'm there healing. That's what I'm doing. I'm down here healing. That's what I'm doing.
Wow. So, and a lot of people don't even, so like you said, a lot of people don't recognize certain things as trauma, and it is trauma. There's a lot of things, because they don't recognize as trauma, that when they have these reactions or, results happening in their life, that is a result of that, not realizing that they may be actually grieving something. And, whether you think about losing someone who has passed away and gone on, or whether you think about losing someone who has been a part of your life, there's different levels of, there's the different levels of grief, but you also have to think of, okay, I'll use an example. When my sister passed away in 2012, our relationship was so tight that her loss was like so devastating to me that I couldn't function for 6 months. Like I was barely eating. I wasn't taking care of I wasn't functioning. But then the following summer, my grandmother, who was now 90 years old, passed away in a similar fashion, but I was able to pick back up after a week. It wasn't that I loved my grandmother any less, but it was like the level of grief, I'm going to say, because I was so much closer to my sister,
that the loss was that much deeper. So when we look at relationships, for example, someone can go through a breakup with one person and they're able to jump back into the dating game 2 weeks later, they're good. Or someone else, maybe 6 months later, they're good. But even when you talk about your connection with someone, we love people on so many different levels, like, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all these different levels. And if you may have had all of those connections with that person, it's healing all the different layers of the onion. You know what I mean? And it's not that simple to be like, yeah, girl, just go back out there and start dating, because you're going to take that hurt and it's going to come out into, the new relationship. And then you're going to be like, well, why can't I, keep a healthy relationship? Or why can't I, have a partner for a long period of time? Well, because you didn't process your grief. You didn't put in coping mechanisms into place now because of the trauma. And now it's just coming out into your actions and your results in your present life. You didn't give yourself that time. You didn't give yourself that grace to feel what you need to feel.
Exactly. And I think that's what it is, that we're not allowed to feel. And so many of us have so many emotions bottled up inside. And, we show up for everybody. We're showing up for our family. We're showing up for our friends. We're showing up for our work, instead of saying, I need some time to process this and recognize that this is a deep wound. It's a deep wound. And so for me, that's what I've been really intentional about. And the book was really a healing catalyst for myself that I gave to other women to say, this is what healing looked like for me. And these were some of the questions that I asked myself. And this is how I got here. How I got to the bathroom floor and how I was slowly able to pick myself back up from it. Here it is, right here in this book.
So what are some of the, I'm going to say, the healing tools or the self-care routines that you have now that are helping you?
For me, it really was about being deliberate and intentional with my self-healing and self-care. So for me now, I started, once I started seeing a therapist, we were in, the height of the pandemic, like strict lockdown. And my therapist said to me, you need to get outside at least for an hour a day. Pop that baby in the stroller and get out for a day, for an hour. And so I would pop the baby in for an hour. And during that walk, I would call a friend on FaceTime, because we also need to make that connection sometimes of seeing somebody. And so that was my time to check in with a friend and say how I was and be really truthful about how I was. So that was part of my self-care routine. Then from that hour walk, I started to break it down to running 15 minutes out of that hour to now I'm running 3 miles a day, right?
Awesome.
But that was something that I felt that jogging and running really helped with my moods. It really affected my moods in a really, very obvious way. The other thing too, and I know someone's going to roll their eyes and go, I ain't got time for all that, right? But meditation has been really a lifesaver for me. And as I mentioned in the book, I said, if you see all of these successful women talking about meditation, down to Beyonce, Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, like all of these women who are talking about how meditation has, Michelle Obama has saved their lives, I think that we need to take note. And so for me, it started with, I would get up about 10 or 15 minutes earlier than the baby. And it wasn't like I was sitting there cross-legged, singing Kumbaya for an hour. It was a 10-minute guided meditation that I would type into YouTube, and I would put 10-minute guided meditation, and I would do it. And that was a way for me to check in and center myself, right? And become a better mother. And I always say meditation makes me a better mother and a better person. So I have to make time for it, right? The other thing was journaling. I found journaling and writing down my feelings and processing was really helpful. Finding a great therapist and being able to speak my truth and my hurts and talk about it in a safe space once a week was also paramount for my healing. The other thing which I did was really monitor what I was ingesting on social media and how much time I was spending on it. And so I started to unfollow every single Instagram influencer who was, standing in matching pajamas with their significant other, drinking hot cocoa with their perfect children, with white furniture, right? And and I was just like, I can't do this because I can't even find a matching pair of damn socks for my kid right now. And he's eating dirty Cheerios off my kitchen floor. That's me. That's who I am at this moment, right? So I was just like, I am not going to do this comparison game. I'm not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I unfollowed anybody's account who made me feel anything like a little bit of crap or a little bit shitty. I was like, I'm not doing this today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I unfollowed them, right? And I always say to people, are always like, oh, but what if they notice that I unfollowed them? Then I said, okay, if you don't want to unfollow them, then mute them.
Mute them.
So they don't even know that you unfollowed them, right? But you don't want to see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also did that with anybody who was remotely connected to my ex. I didn't want to know what was going on, right? So I unfollowed all of that. That was the other thing that I did because I no longer wanted to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I did was affirmations. I'm a big believer. It was no coincidence that my book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, was published through Hay House, because one of the first self-help books I ever read was with Louise Hay, who is the founder of Hay House.
Oh, wow.
And it was You Can Heal Your Life. And she talked about doing affirmations and affirming yourself every day. And at first it feels strange. There's a chapter in the book where I talk about how you do affirmations of looking in the mirror and saying, I am loved and cared for. Everywhere I go, I am supported. Things are always working out for me. And sometimes I would literally just sit there and be like, Trey, you're going to be okay. Trey, you're going to be okay. Trey, you are loved and supported. And affirmations really helped. And I always say to people when they say, well, I don't know about this affirmation thing. I say, okay, well, think about how often you believe that negative voice.
Exactly.
When that negative Kathy is saying, oh, you're so stupid. Oh, you're never going to get that job. Oh, you're a lousy mom. How often do you believe that? So why is it that you don't think that by affirming something positive, your mind will believe that?
Exactly.
Right?
You have a choice.
So, yeah, exactly. And so you make the choice of what that voice is going to be. And then for me, it was about really setting time for doing me time. I would put the kid to bed an hour early, and he didn't notice. And I knew that he was going to bed an hour early. And instead of being that super mom of like, this is what we do when our kids go down early or they go to grandma's for the weekend, what do? We do an extra load of laundry. We start vacuuming, right? That's what we do, right? That's what we do as women. And for me, I'm just like, no, the house can look like a damn pit. I am going to set a bath and use that hour for myself to sit in the bath, listen to a podcast, and chill out. And I had to really stop myself from doing all of those other things that I thought would make me, a superwoman. And I was just like, no, I'm going to take this hour for myself. And that's something that I really encourage women and my clients that I work with. Stop with the extra load of laundry. Stop picking, lint off your carpet when you got some downtime. You don't need to. It's okay.
Yeah.
So those are some of the tools that I really use and I believe in,
Like everything that you've listed, I'm going to say that those are all the same things that are in my toolbox. And I found if I break them into mind, body, and soul, so I'm making sure that every single day, all of those things that are on that list of self-care is feeding my mind, feeding my body, and feeding my soul. And like, when you talked about the walking outside, I can tell you exact same thing. Part of my healing journey has been outside every day, 5-kilometer walks, whether it be by myself, with a friend, with my son, somebody. I have to be in nature or by the water, but how healing that is for not just your body, but healing for your mind. Like there's so many health benefits when they talk about walking outside. Like it relieves stress and it prevents diseases and it works towards weight loss and all of those amazing things. And then when you talk about meditations, there's a lot of people, and I'm going to say especially what I found, it's been more, I'm going to say I've seen it more being picked up and accepted by women in the Black community. But before, people would look at meditation as, oh, that's whatever, that's hokey pokey, that's whatever their views were about it. But I found when you actually study, the health benefits, and if you're using it for, breathing exercise, it doesn't have to be, because I've had some women when I used to go to a particular church and they were like, oh, well, that's, practicing a different You're inviting other spirits, like, they always have their myths or whatever you want to call it. But meditation, it calms your nervous system. And I'm someone who struggles with anxiety. I was diagnosed back in 2006. I meditate every single night before I go to my bed. And with my Fitbit, whether it be a 10-minute meditation or a 20-minute meditation, you can see the results of my heart rate going from 100 beats per minute or 99 beats per minute, dropping down to 75 beats per minute or 69 beats per minute. Like, it calms your nervous system. You talked about the importance of journaling. And some people may not understand that when you journal, it's a safe place for you to talk about how you feel. You're getting it out. You're releasing that energy. Do you know what I mean? And geez, thank you so much for bringing up the point of therapy. And I think maybe more so I'm hearing about it in the past year, but it was almost taboo in the Black community to talk about therapy because, especially culturally, if you come from a Caribbean background, if you have any mental health issues, you are written off, you're considered crazy, you need to go to the mental hospital, all of those things, but not realizing there's so many, I'm going to say there's already so many different levels of mental health, but therapy should be like giving your car an oil change. It's a checkup. It's to make sure that you maintain and that you stay well. It's having a safe place where you don't feel judged, that you can talk about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and you're given tools and coping mechanisms to work through that. And you talked about the importance of basically self-awareness, people who you follow on social media. Energy is transferable. Yeah. And if I am on, like, I've had a lot of people who are actually really offended that I don't follow them on Instagram. And it's like, honestly, Instagram is, it is what you make it, because the algorithms pick up the things that you choose to look at. So I have friends that are like, all they see on their feeds are negative memes or certain things. And then they are very negative people. And I'm like, that stuff doesn't even come on my timeline. The only stuff I see on my timeline is coping mechanisms for mental health, things to help me deal with my anxiety, people who are also putting out other positive messages about overcoming and dealing with resilience, other women who I'm inspired by. So it's important that we pay attention to what we are consuming, what we are allowing to come in, because that affects what comes out. And then you spoke about affirmations. I think affirmations are really, really, I'm going to say underrated, because when you talked about people, when you talk about people who, they'll listen to the negative self-talk, but they won't acknowledge the positive self-talk. And I think it's after the age of 25, there's only really two ways as adults that we will learn. And one is through a huge emotional bang, which is usually trauma in our case. And two is through repetition. And I am someone who strongly believes in affirmations. I write in my gratitude journal and write down my affirmations every single day. I have affirmation cards from the ladies at Love Powered Co. I also wrote my own affirmations book, but it's the positive messages that we tell ourselves every day that seep into our subconscious mind, which is our feeling mind. Yeah. And it allows us to reprogram the programming that's in there. So if there's a negative thought that you have about yourself and you don't quite yet believe the positive, give yourself an affirmation that's the opposite of how you currently feel, and tell yourself that every single day. Look in the mirror. I write it on my mirror in lipstick. There's so many, different methods to using affirmations, but I really do think it's highly underrated. And then I think lastly, you said about the me time. I think because of the previous toxic culture of hustle, 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 we have forgotten the importance of having me time. I think when we're getting to know somebody and we want to get to know them on a deeper level, we spend time with that person. But yet, how many people actually spend time with themselves? How many people spend time getting to know what they enjoy, doing what they enjoy? Like, if we're not doing those things, then we're constantly in this negative headspace or being pulled left, right, and center by the outside world and outside people. So I think it's so important that you spoke to all of those things. I'm like, we have the same toolbox.
There you go. There you go. That is good. That is good. I believe that, right?
So I want you to tell the people where they could stay connected with you online before we go to the final rapid fire.
Yes, I'm definitely much more active on Instagram. You can follow me at Black Girl in Love on Instagram. Facebook, I'm under Trey Anthony, so you can follow me, Trey Anthony. And then on Twitter, I'm trying to get better. I'm not as good on Twitter, but I'm on Twitter under Trey Anthony, and I'm working on it. But Twitter is just not my friend right now, but I'm trying to get better. So that's the best place to find me. And also my website, if you want to get in touch with me, it's TreyAnthony.com, and that's Trey, Trey, Anthony.com.
Perfect. So I will definitely have your website and all your socials in the link in the details section below your episode, so they don't have to search too far. They can just click and connect with you directly.
Yay. Good. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So the final segment of the show, I call it a walk in her wisdom. And I just ask maybe 5 quick rapid fire questions. You can respond in either one word or one sentence.
Hey, all
right. Let's start with, what new belief, behavior, or habit has improved your life in the last 5 years?
Running.
Awesome. When and where are you the happiest?
Curled up on my couch watching a documentary.
Awesome. Name a book that has changed or greatly impacted your life.
Oh, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Awesome. What have you become better at saying no to in the last 5 years? And that could be distractions, invitations, family.
No to going to events that I really don't like the people who are going to be there.
Love it. All right. And last but not least, what impact do you want to have on the world?
I want to have the impact that I allow women to believe that they are worthy of self-love and care and healing.
Love it. Wow. And on that note, Trey, I want to thank you for transparently sharing your story with us, the ups, the downs, the goods, and the bads, because I honestly believe that our pain births our purpose. So I'm just grateful that you've put it into a book to help other women, including myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much for providing this platform. I really, really do appreciate it, and for giving me this safe space to tell my story. So thank you.
Thank you, and you're welcome. You're so welcome.
To all you legacy leavers out there, until next time, subscribe on all platforms, and don't forget to rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcast. Join the community of legacy leavers and sign up for our weekly newsletter at awalkinmystilettos.com, and be sure to grab one of my personal development books available online everywhere. And if you can think of one person that would receive value from today's show, please share it with them. Feel free to screenshot this week's episode, and you can tag us on Instagram. You can tag myself at TheRealMcKinney-Smith, and you can tag Trey Anthony at Black Girl in Love, and continue to walk in greatness in your stilettos in a manner worthy of your calling.